Welcome to this week's episode of Tell Me More. We're in the studio, all three of us, and we are beginning the journey toward Easter and our Lenten journey. And we discuss the Psalms of Ascent, we discuss the history of Easter, and we encourage each other with this powerful psalm that we studied on Sunday. So don't miss it.
Okay, well, we are here doing Tell Me More again. We're in a new season.
Welcome, welcome.
Look at us go.
We have closed the book on winter as a season, as a preaching season. Yep.
It's still going to keep coming up.
Yep.
But we're in a new season for our church, if you
Tell
didn't
me
know.
more.
So what season is this?
We are in the season of Lent and Easter. How about that?
You said Lent so cheerfully.
Well, it's because I love this season of the year for us. I love the journey that we're on, and it's always different every year. But I'm really looking forward to the journey this year. Well, it's already begun. Started on Wednesday.
It
Ash
did.
Wednesday.
Yes.
What a good service.
Oh my goodness.
So meaningful, so special.
Powerful.
If you're the one administering the ashes, what's the proper word? Imposing the ashes. It is, I don't even know about the rest of the service. It's just so humbling. And it's a very spiritual act to just be the one to ask people to repent. If you're not doing your own self-reflect, I mean, that's just a powerful thing. So I love Ash Wednesday.
Yeah, it was very, very powerful, meaningful. And now we've got our face turned toward Easter, and comes really early this year.
It does, March 31st.
One of the earliest.
Yeah, April will come and Easter will be done.
Right.
Isn't that wild? It's just interesting.
So it is. We can thank
Yes,
Pope
Dr. Wells.
Gregory the 13th for that.
Tell us more. Why does Easter change? Why does it move on the calendar?
Well, the church historically, Council of Nicaea wanted us to establish Easter as a particular Sunday through the year or each year. But the problem with that is, the Passover changes, and so you want the celebration of Easter to be connected to that. And so the church by that time had adopted the Julian calendar, and the Julian calendar. So it is a solar calendar. However, it doesn't take into accommodation really the way the leap year is supposed to work, and so you have to wait until 1582 till we finally get it resolved, and that's Pope Gregory the 13th, and he had been dealing with all these mathematicians, and the problem is the church in the East, the church in the West, and had disagreed about the date, and so finally he brought in enough folks who understood the cycle of both the moon and our revolving around the sun to finally set the date of Easter. So 1582, he issued a papal bull and reorganized the calendar, and then it was actually named after him. It's now called the Gregorian calendar, which is what we use. And basically, they established what occurs every year is called the ecclesiastical moon, and it's the first ecclesiastical moon after the spring equinox, and then the first Sunday after that is Easter.
Okay.
So it moves a little bit here and there.
So we got to
the
get through
first
spring
churchy
equinox.
moon
Yeah, so it can't
after
be
the spring
that's right.
equinox.
So it can't be
It's named after the
earlier
church.
than March
the
21st.
equestystical
Yeah, the
moon.
ecclesiastical moon. March 21st is
That's
the
spring equinox.
earliest
That's
that it
always
can
spring
happen.
equinox, right? Is March 20th. So that one's set. But the next time we get
We've got to get the moon.
not full moon, the ecclesiastical moon.
Some people call it the Paschal moon. And
I've heard
once you
that.
have
Like
that,
Easter
first
moon.
Sunday after that is Easter. But the problem was when he issued, and they figured out that in order to determine the right number of leap years, you also have to factor in the every time you turn a century, 1700, 1800. If a year is divisible by 100, you don't have a leap year unless it's divisible by 400, and then you add the leap year, and that's where they corrected the calendar. And so it was kind of interesting that year in 1582 though, because it was like October 2nd, and so they realized they needed to just add like 12 days. So you on the calendar there you go from October 2nd to like October 14th. So there's no
Those days don't exist in
that's
history.
Right. They just do away
How
with
about
all
that?
them. And so, but the problem is, by that time, the Reformation was burgeoning, and mostly in full bloom. So the Church of England said, we're not going to accept a papal bull to tell us when to set Easter.
Right.
The Orthodox Church, you might imagine, said the last
Who are
person
you?
we're going to be looking to tell us when Easter is the Pope.
We're actually not very interested in what Rome has to say.
Julian calendar.
Yeah.
But eventually what happened was it was really kings and princes and the Pope was after obviously a liturgical calendar, but the civil calendar was important to him too. So finally, you had enough kings and princes who said, look, we need a civil calendar that all of Europe can agree to. And so eventually they came to an agreement that, okay, this calendar actually works. So it was pretty much adopted. So when the British government adopted it, they still were in control of the U.S. And so, we also adopted that calendar.
Here we are.
And that is how Easter moves around the calendar.
Year, the ecclesiastical moon will occur, and then the very first Sunday after that is March 31st, and so that'll be Easter. So it's pretty early for us this year. Yeah. And so that also helps date
Ash Wednesday.
It's a little bit confusing because Ash Wednesday is credited to another Gregory, who's actually the original Gregory the First or Gregory the Great.
So it goes back before
600. Yeah, when he was pastor of the church at Rome. I always hesitate to call him Pope because I don't know that he had that much authority. He certainly wouldn't have called himself that. But regardless, he's the one who said we need to have a season of preparation. And so 40 days is a biblical number. So he chose 40 days, but and to prepare, to fast, to pray. But the problem is you can't fast, according to Catholic theology.
You don't fast on Sundays.
You can't fast on Sunday. So you have to pull the Sundays out. So,
right.
So if you take the Sundays out and put 40 days, then you back up to that Wednesday. And that kind of became the day to begin the journey. And so the two Gregories have influenced what we're doing right now. It's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Thanks, Greg.
That's exactly right.
Appreciate you. Thank you, Greg, today, if you see one.
So
on behalf
it's
of all.
confusing because even to this day, the Orthodox Church still will not embrace that papal bull.
And that's why if you have Orthodox friends, they are celebrating Easter on a different day. They're celebrating Palm Sunday on a different day.
Correct.
So if you were to drive past an Orthodox church and one Sunday they're out and they walk around their building with palm fronds and you see them doing that and you think it's not Palm Sunday.
It is for them.
Why? It is their Palm Sunday.
Right. Yeah, so they've never embraced it. And so it gets a little confusing for us, but that's kind of the history of it. And so, the civil calendar has accepted it. And so it's pretty much embraced, across the Western world. So Easter Sunday's marked on the calendar we know it's a religious celebration, but I mean, it's a civil date.
Schools have the day off.
Right.
That's
cities,
right.
yeah.
So is what it is. And so here we are. So we've had Ash Wednesday already.
Right.
Powerful. And then Sunday, we began
Yesterday.
This journey
Together in ascent.
That's right. I felt led, as I shared with the church Sunday, as I was out in July, and I felt this sense, this need, this hope, this desire for us to build a stronger community together. Again, coming out of the isolation. I know people are tired of mentioning the pandemic, but I mean, it is what it is. It's had a profound effect upon us, whether we want to admit it or not. And so the calling to be the people of God, to me, is a powerful one. And so that idea of being together, I just kept focusing on that word, while I was studying in July. Next thing you know, I looked up every Hebrew word, every Greek word, and there's so many different words in both Hebrew and Greek for together. And then once I did that, then I laid out our liturgical calendar, kind of our 8 seasons of the year, if you will, and just decided, all right, I want to look at the different ways we can address what it means to be together. Also wanted to use every section of Scripture through the year. And so
if I was new to maybe reading the Bible, what do you mean by that? Because we have the Old Testament and the New Testament. Are you telling me there are more sections of Scripture than the Old and New Testament?
Yes, tell me more.
Tell us more.
What do you mean by that? I thought there were just 2.
Yeah, when you look at the Old Testament, you have the books of the law. We typically refer to that as the Torah.
Okay, so that's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy.
That's right. Then you have this
All-stars.
Narrative material, in the Old Testament, things like Samuel and Kings and Chronicles.
Where we get the story of David.
And in the Hebrew Bible, that's in a
Solomon.
different section. It's called the writings.
That's right. So it's unto itself, if you will.
So we've got 2 sections so far.
But you also have the wisdom material, things like the Psalms and the Proverbs and the
Job, Ecclesiastes.
Song of Solomon. But then
That's
you
3.
have the prophets, the prophetic material. So you've got Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and
Okay, so far,
4.
the books of the law.
1.
We have kind of historical writings. We
2.
have what scholars sometimes call hymnic and wisdom literature.
3.
And the prophets.
correct.
4.
Okay.
And then you get to the New Testament.
What?
And
That must be 5.
You've got the Gospels.
Oh,
Okay, so there's
that's
5.
Yeah. So,
I'm going to need my other hand putting my coffee down. So that's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Right. And then you've got the book of Acts, which is really
Its own thing.
Yeah, its own thing. And then you've got the epistolary literature, got
that's a big word.
the letters, if you will. So, as you start
Is there another?
Well, you could go to seven's a great word, but you could go to the apocalyptic literature.
Luke is holding up 7 fingers.
Yeah.
So
right
if
now.
we count
the apocalyptic
there's an 8th.
literature,
There's an 8th if you
we
add
move to 8.
Revelation.
That's right.
But we like 7 better.
Yeah.
7 is fun. You could consider Revelation a letter, epistolary in some form.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to group it there.
So from a preaching perspective, if you're planning a year, not every year maybe, but sometimes you're thinking, how do I hit all these genres? How do I hit the whole scope of what we're doing, right? So that's what you're talking about. Happen in July.
You give the church an opportunity to get the full scope of the biblical material, at least at some point during the year. So that's what I'm trying to do this year. So obviously we began with Ephesians because I wanted to, set the tone for kind of where we're headed. Just a little bit of Ephesians actually in the winter. We didn't really delve into the whole book. But now we're going to be in this wisdom literature. In the spring, we're going to go to the book of the law. We're going to do the book of Exodus, studying the book of Exodus
after Easter.
Wednesday, after
when we
Easter.
get to Easter.
So we're just going to make our way through these different genres of biblical material throughout the year.
So your preaching on Sunday mornings is Psalms of Ascent, particularly Psalms of Ascent.
Right.
The daily Bible readings, which are actually the same text each day.
The weekly Bible readings.
Right, but we're going to read them each day.
Yes.
It's tricky that way.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It has both a psalm
and it's really good
and a narrative.
because I love the grand scope of the material, but it also gives me a chance to introduce all of that to the church. And most of our seasoned veterans already know all of that. So, but some people may not know it. So at least gives you a sense of the scope of the biblical material. Plus, it also connects you to the big story because the big story is woven through it all. And this year, I've also tried to think about. We've talked about APEST, the apostles, prophets, evangelists, and shepherds and teachers, and the idea that that it's almost like if you think about each one of them, they kind of carry a different tenor, a different voice to the conversation in the life of the church. And so I'm trying to adopt that a little bit in even how I'm preaching. So in the winter, introducing all of this to the church, because some of this is new for us to have a conversation about, felt somewhat apostolic, letting our people think about these gifts or these gifted people and how they function in the life of the church. But now we've shifted gears. Now we're on an Easter journey through the Psalms, and this feels more like a shepherding journey. So I'm trying to adopt the voice of a shepherd.
Which isn't too hard for you to do.
Right. I kind of like that one. So
you kind of have the voice of a shepherd. It's good.
So that's what I'm trying to do. So, and so Sunday, Psalm 121, one of my all-time favorite Psalms.
Yes.
And my goodness, church member Sunday morning said something to me about that particular Psalm, how God has already used it in their lives, in their own journey. I had one of our church members send me a musical arrangement of it, which was just absolutely incredible. So it kind of struck a nerve for many of our people because that Psalm is very familiar. And it's one of my wife's favorite Psalms. What's funny is Saturday, was it Saturday? I think, yeah. Ada, our granddaughter, wanted to just spend the day with us. She had a little basketball game, and so after the game, they had a little party, and then she just wanted to hang out with me and Poppy. So we took her for the day, and so that evening we were at our house, and my wife loves the musical, The Sound of Music.
It is a classic.
Yeah, it's not my favorite, but I mean, I get it. We've seen it enough.
It's a classic.
I mean, it's Julie Andrews.
And I love Julie Andrews. In fact, when
it has its
she
place,
first
even
came
if you
on,
don't love
Ada
it.
said, "That's Mary Poppins." So she's more familiar with that one.
Fair.
But
It's fair.
when you get to the end of The Sound of Music, when the Von Trapp family is hiding in the convent, and the Mother Superior is trying to help them, and then Julie Andrews and the husband say, well, okay, the borders are all closed, we can't drive, and he said something like, well, I tell you what, we'll drive. And he kind of points. He said, we'll drive up to the mountains, we'll park, and then we'll just run. And she looks at them and says, well, when you do that, you will not be by yourselves. And they all kind of looked at each other, and she kind of looks off. She said, "I'll lift my eyes unto the hills from whence cometh my help." And she quotes Psalm 121.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was sitting there while that was happening. So I just paused the movie and I said, "I will be preaching on that tomorrow, just like for y'all to know."
Let's just take this moment and recognize.
Yeah. I'm surprised we didn't sing "Climb Every Mountain."
Yeah, we could have.
We missed a moment.
Yeah.
Well, you could do it now.
Yeah, we could. Let Luke do it.
We could, but just like Paul says, oh, he did it.
That's as much as
Thanks,
you're
Luke.
going to get.
That was plenty.
But I love
In a
that
good way.
image. I love that.
We don't need more than that.
But I love that sense of, this idea of being on a pilgrimage obviously is connected to the Psalms of Ascent, and that you are on this journey toward Jerusalem, presumably. That's what at least most of us believe about these Psalms.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. I like that
Yeah.
sense of ascending to the hill, making our way toward Jerusalem.
Yes.
So
Very powerful image
It is.
Mm-hmm.
as we prepare ourselves for the Lenten journey. Or I guess we're on it, but we're not. We're still starting out in terms of days. It's a powerful thought.
It is.
I
It
think,
is.
thought practice for our people. So
Yeah.
the metaphor.
Yeah.
Luke, you got some Hebrew pulled up on your iPad.
Well, I mean, Luke's the Hebrew man, so
Luke's our Hebrew man.
Let's not overstate my Hebrew skills.
Well, among us in this moment, Luke's our Hebrew man.
we're considering you that, my brother.
Yeah. It's an eight verse psalm.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
It is.
It's
Little
so-
strophes.
Yeah. And you use some Greek to talk about it on Sunday. And
In a diplosis.
Yeah. Well, just that repetitive, I minored in literature in college. And so, I love how poets are able to, they're so economical with their work, the good ones.
Yes.
They're economical
Yes.
with their words. So they have to use techniques to get your attention. And that's one of the things I love about that. This idea that you can repeat something, and it's almost like you can read it first without even noticing it because it just flows.
Right.
Yep.
And then if you'll stop and go, "No, wait a minute."
But then if it's repeated, it catches you.
Watch.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
one of the hallmarks of Hebrew hymnic literature, which is the book of Psalms, is this usage of parallelism, is what some Old Testament scholars call it. And that's really where you have essentially two lines or even sets of four lines, quatrains, if you will, that really parallel one another. So Hebrew poetry often utilizes no rhyme. There's not really a discernible rhythm or cadence. Like, if you studied literature, you would think about like Shakespeare uses iambic pentameter. You don't have
You're not
that
going to see that.
in Hebrew
Yeah.
poetry. There's no rhyme. Meter is not discernible.
but there is reason.
There's reason, but their poetic device is parallelism.
Repetition.
And it's this
Right.
repetition of
Right.
lines and an expounding of an idea line by line to build to something bigger.
Yeah. And that to me, once you notice it, it's like you can't unnotice it.
Yeah.
Right.
Particularly in this psalm. And it starts off to me with, and I also like the way, this is just my image of how you begin in first person, I'm going to do this. And then the response is, well, here's what'll happen to you when you do this. And I just kind of envision that as the leader starting this song while they're walking, and then the congregation responds to him. Some people say, well, no, this was an internal dialogue, that a person's having, which, whatever. We don't really know for sure. But we do know they sang their way to Jerusalem.
Right.
And so I just imagine them singing this over the person that's the leader. What was interesting was when the service was over, we had a visitor Sunday morning, a guest. They're actually part of the family of our church. They just live somewhere else now. But he's in the Air Force, and he came up to me and he said, I've never thought about Psalm 121 the way you described it this morning, with that leader saying something that everyone else responding. And he said, in my training, when I was in basic training, all of our marching songs, you have a leader and a chorus. And he said, I've been doing this for years in the Air Force. When you go back and have to retrain. And he said, the leader speaks, then all of us respond to him. And he said, I reread the psalm so differently after that. And so that was interesting.
Well, I like it in the imagery of together.
Right.
That,
Right.
even if we're not sure, let's just pretend for a minute that this is done communally. And we are journeying toward Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were watching one of the Chosens, I think it was had to do something with Christmas also Saturday. We just watched a snippet of it, and it was Mary and Joseph were on the way to Bethlehem. And it was, on the way to Bethlehem for, with her waiting to have a baby. And it was interesting because there were all kind of people on the road, and I guess I hadn't thought much about it, to be honest with you, in a long time. And you could just see groups of people traveling. Now, they weren't going to Jerusalem, but they were going for the tax situation.
For the census, yeah.
And, they were just kind of traveling as entourages, and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. We do that as families sometimes, And,
Little caravan.
You'd almost never travel alone
Yeah,
in these days. It would have been incredibly dangerous.
yeah,
And the idea that there's a lot of movement because there's a census. They're not these solo travelers.
Yeah.
The whole region is affected by it. It's kind of a fun imagery,
Kind of fascinating.
The hustle and bustle.
Anyway, so yeah, it's
good.
So here we are, Psalm 121.
Yeah. Well, any of these, again, I see Luke scrolling, so Luke, hop in. But there's some rich vocabulary in it.
Just in case.
Well, no, and we talked about some yesterday, but I think it is worth emphasizing. Some of the words that we are so familiar with in English, we see them in the Psalms, and we think we know what they mean. You did a good job yesterday, Dr. Wiles, of helping us know that sometimes the English doesn't do justice.
Yeah.
So you talk about God. Where does my help come from?
That's right.
We talk about help. Even in Genesis, you talk about God is our helper. We think of it as, you talked about helping somebody move, but really help us understand what are we really getting into when we talk about God as our help?
Well, I think it's that particular word is used as a noun, I think 20 times in the Old Testament. And the overwhelming majority of the time it's referring to God's power to deliver, not just, I think the word, I get it. It's sometimes you have to translate. So
right.
You got to find words.
But this is a potent word full of power.
It's not just help, like I'll show up and help you load some furniture. This is like intervene in your life.
Like a deliverer.
With power.
Right. The majority of the usage in the Old Testament this is a verb that accompanies God's person. Some of the notable exceptions are, it's also the descriptor of Eve.
Right.
That's right. Right.
One more time. Say that one more time.
Said,
this is a word that accompanies
Adam,
God's attributes and then also gets applied to women.
That's right. Because the Lord told Adam, I will make a helper suitable for you. And again, when you hear that word, it sounds somewhat less than great. And I'm going to be a helper. Yeah. But when you realize that word is attached to God almost exclusively in the Old Testament, and it's just a picture of his presence and his power and just what he brings to everything that without him is just not present.
Right.
It's just not there unless he's there and he brings that. And so I think about in my life, just how many times have I needed God's help where I've actually paused and said, I need help. I need to figure this out. I need to know how to deal with this right here. I need to know how to make this decision. It's just, that's what I try to say Sunday morning. You're just in your life, you're going to face so many times where you feel helpless. You feel like you don't know what to do. Sometimes.
But again, when we talk about help, it's not like, man, I could just use like a friend to buy me a cup of coffee and listen.
Right.
We need like deliverance.
Yes. We need to pull me out of the pit.
Yes,
right.
that kind of help.
Or absolute just clarity.
But I think that affects your image. I think that affects your image of God is why I'm interrupting to tell you that. Because I think if we just think God's our helper in a kind of that weaker sense, like he's there when you need him to help you, just choose A or B instead of our deliverer when we really can't do something. We're really in need of help in the deepest sense. That's the God that we...
And so if you're thinking about this word, think about the last time we've sang in church, here I raise mine Ebenezer, hither by thy help I've come. So the Hebrew word for help is ezer. Eben is stone. So that literally is a transliteration of a Hebrew word, stone of help. It's where you raise a memorial to God's help in your life. So when you've sung that song, I'm sure if you're like me, you've thought about, these are the times I have come through with God's help. This is not like, someone helped me put something in the crock pot this morning.
That's right.
This is God has powerfully intervened in my life to come alongside me.
Yes. Right. And I've just had numerous experiences with the Lord where He's just intervened. And so, when Cindy and I go to Rome, we have a place we always go to and stop because there was a particular moment in my life where God intervened in a very powerful, memorable, unforgettable way. And I know exactly where I was when it happened. And so every year when we go to Rome, we go right there and stop for a moment. And That's our Ebenezer. We didn't raise anything there. We didn't have to. There are enough monuments in Rome. We just claimed one that was already there.
Yeah,
Right.
you're not going to forget where that corner is. Yeah.
And so there's a Bernini obelisk, and he cast it on the back of an elephant. It's right in front of Santa Maria sopra Minerva, which is a very famous church in Rome. And I was right there when this happened to me, and so we can't walk by that place without stopping and pausing and thanking God for what He's done. So I've just got those experiences in my life, and where I know I need His intervention, and I've seen His hand in my life, and He's done things that I could not do myself or undo myself, and I've watched Him do it. It's kind of like Jehoshaphat, one of my favorite stories in the Scripture, when God said, "Let me fight this one. You just stand back and watch, and I will show you what only I can do." Well, we have those moments in our lives, and so find yourself trying to make a huge decision, or you're trying to climb out of a situation that you found yourself in, and it doesn't seem recoverable. And the Lord just has a way of working. He doesn't always, obviously. Speaking of calendars, if He was on the dentist calendar, that would be awesome. But He's on His own calendar, and so I've had to learn through the years to reconcile myself to His plan, His will, His timing. But I've learned to trust Him, even though, in my weakness still, sometimes I do cry out to Him and ask Him, are you paying attention? Do you know this is going on? I know you're busy. That sounds facetious, but but there are times when I find myself even doubting a little bit, but He has over and over and over shown me His power to intervene and deliver. And I trust Him to do it, and trust Him to do it in His own terms. And I've had to come to grips with that. So, yeah. So if you're at a place in your life right now where you don't know what to do, you need help, you need intervention, you need wisdom, you need guidance, you need peace, you need comfort, man, this is where to go.
Lord.
One of my colleagues was at church Sunday, and I didn't know it. I didn't see him. And he and I have pastored through the years. He's not pastoring now. He works for Texas Baptist. And his wife has just died. And it's been a very challenging, difficult time in his life. And so when the service is over, I look up, and there he is. And I told him, I said, "Brother, I had no idea you were here today." And he said, "I was sitting at the back." And, well, he's got tears in his eyes. And he said, "I wasn't sure what I was going to do today. I decided to go First Baptist Arlington and just hear my friend Dennis." And he said, "And you obviously decided to preach a sermon just to me, because I need God's help right now." And I thought, man, oh man, what a word from the Lord.
Yeah.
Just exactly what he needed.
Yeah.
And so.
Right.
Good.
Yeah.
And if you're sitting there thinking, I don't know where I would even ask God for help right now. Life is good. Then you just prepare for those moments.
Yeah.
I mean, not like hold on to your butts, here it comes,
right.
but that's a Jurassic Park quote, by the way. Just softens
Once
the
again,
blow.
Katie is a big Jurassic Park fan.
Yeah, who
I've
isn't? Come on.
never seen
Oh
it.
yeah. Well, I was like 8 when it came out, so it's a home run for me. But anyway, but
And I felt a little judgment from you when I told you I'd never seen it before.
Well,
So I
and
still haven't- I
We
still
may
haven't
still
seen
be
it.
judging you a little
I
bit.
still haven't seen it. So
I publicly apologize for feelings I cannot control. No, but I think we God is there when we need Him, and in the good times.
Right.
Let's not lose sight of this. This is a God that still deserves
That's
our
right.
whole selves. That's all I'm trying to say.
which
with that.
goes to the next word. He watches.
Yeah. Keeps.
Preach it.
He watches. And
Isn't that good?
I actually love that word.
Yeah.
I really do, because to me, it just means so much to me to watch, to watch over, to guard, to keep, to protect. And man, that, speaking of repetition, I think it's 6 times in 3 through 8.
And this is not watching TV. This
Right.
this is new mom watching the baby monitor.
Yeah, this is, He will not let your foot slip.
Yeah.
He who watches over you will not slumber. I mean, that's powerful. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will not slumber nor sleep. There's that good repetition.
And those
I'm
are
talking
2
about.
words we can get into, because one is
About
it's not the
slumbering
same
and
2
sleeping.
sleep words.
Yeah.
One is I'm like dozing off and falling asleep. The other is just like deep,
out.
conked out. So God doesn't doze off on the couch.
No,
And God isn't taking a deep slumber.
that's right. So, and I love
Good.
that idea that he's watching, he's keeping.
Yeah. And then at the end, over your coming and going,
Yeah.
both now and forevermore. Well, that's pretty comprehensive.
What a great word, for
powerful,
us.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That you never escape his attention. You never move far. You never move so far that you're beyond his reach. and his ability to watch over you and to protect you, even in ways that you don't know or understand or even acknowledge.
Yeah.
I just love that. And
I think as I listen to you say that, and I've talked about that in here, I often listen to the sermon later. I don't listen to it live because I'm serving our church behind the scenes in those ways. But that really, I think that caught me because I was just reflecting on it. I was actually getting gas and listening to it about how that might shape our prayer life too. If you know that God is not asleep at the wheel and God is not, we don't have to ring the doorbell and knock down the door just to wake him up to get his attention for what we need. There's an attentive God that doesn't tire. And we know this, that's kind of an attribute of God. But I think the way that the psalmist writes it really can get your attention on just the God that's waiting for you and watching over you and ready.
And he can see in the dark.
Yeah, and and it's not just up there. Well, you talked about other deities and other religions, some, especially ancient Near East, which just the ancient ones around, kind of when the Bible was written. They even portray them as just absent-minded or not that good or just asleep, and you have to really get their attention just to help you. And you have to convince them to even help you or just sneak by them to stay out of their wrath. There's just such a different image of the gods than, the Yahweh that we get. Yeah.
And I just love that. When you're captured by that vision of who God is, that he can see in the dark and that he's comfortable in the dark. I mean, the Bible opens in darkness and he's just hovering, his presence is so powerful. And so in those dark moments of my life, where I can't necessarily see, he's watching and guarding. And he sees perfectly. And so I just have to trust him in those moments and trust his care for me. And I think that when you think about them on a journey to Jerusalem, if it's a literal physical journey, there's so much treachery along the way, as I mentioned Sunday, with bandits and potential injuries and not enough water or food, or you're carrying everything with you and everybody knows that. So you're susceptible. I mean, there's just so many things. And the idea that at some point you're going to have to rest. Well, let's just say you decided, what if we said, okay, we're not going to purchase our animals this year in Jerusalem. We're going to take our own animals. Okay. So we've chosen you had to take your very best. So you've got the very best of everything you have. And so who's going to sleep?
Someone's not,
so think about it. Well, he never sleeps, and so that idea that he's there watching over us and he's caring for us and that he has our best interest at heart in the sense of how it connects to his will and his plan. I don't know. I just think it's a great way to launch the Lenten season for me, that we're all on a journey. We're all in different places. But we're not going to travel this road alone. And I just think if you need to hear that today, well, then let that just wash over your soul. You're not by yourself, as lonely as you can feel. We've talked about that in here before, how loneliness is an epidemic and how, the other day, Kurt Grice sent us this article about how we've become less and less social over the last 50 years.
As a society.
As a society. People are spending more time doing every activity alone. They have this whole fascination with watching people, like people that are bowling alone.
Robert Putnam, famous book, Bowling Alone.
Yeah, which is you think about it. Who bowls, alone? I mean, now I did that day we were hiding from the staff, but.
Yeah, but even then you chatted with every staff member there.
Course.
You couldn't, even then you couldn't do it by yourself.
I just couldn't help myself.
Yeah.
So how did we get to that point? That whole idea of being alone and isolated? Well, the Bible to me just carries us to a whole different reality, to where we're not alone. God is with us and he calls us to be together with his people. And so, I don't know, I think it's a great way to start Easter, and then next Sunday we're going to look at a really powerful Psalm 122. You're in there's everything in the world going on all around us. Psalm 122 is one of those famous Psalms also about finding peace in the midst of whatever it is that you're facing. So this is going to be a shepherding journey, for the Easter season. Give me a chance to shepherd our people, encourage them as they walk toward the cross. And
I love it.
I'm looking forward to it.
I'm enjoying it. Can I give a plug before we wrap up? And Luke, you may have other places you want to go to. I don't mean to.
Oh, no, go ahead.
We're doing our Ascent booklet.
Yes.
Our Together in Word and Deed booklet. And the text for this week is Psalm 46.
Yeah, which is powerful.
Well, and so is the Mark passage. because you've given us some gospel narrative to go with it. So we stay attached to the story of Jesus, which I think is awesome. So it kicks off with Jesus getting baptized by John and the Spirit hovering, the voice from God booming. That's a beautiful and powerful passage. Psalm 46, though, I was reading this morning, and I won't read it all to y'all because that's your assignment.
That's your
to
assignment
go do
this
it.
week. Spend the week in Psalm 46.
But that's my plug. I just say I read it this morning, and it's really been generative for me in my spirit in my time with God. And so don't miss it, because if you miss it, you miss it.
You do.
You do.
And then God will meet you next week, but there's something for you this week. There it is.
Great. Be still and know that I'm God. Wow, I love that. And
I
he
know.
will be exalted.
Yeah.
Regardless of what we think or, nations are in uproar. It's almost like that was written this morning.
I know. And that's the very end of it. Don't miss we can talk. This is more for me than for y'all, but there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God.
I love this.
Just think about it. Okay. So don't miss the daily Bible reading.
Amen. Wow.
And then we have stuff for you to do. So do it.
Yeah.
And then
Together in word,
look at the
together in
companion
deed.
page about how you put it into action, which is really valuable. Thank you, Luke, for
Very good.
peek behind the curtain. Luke,
Excellent.
we don't put our names next to it, but Luke wrote that part. So appreciate
Really
you, Luke.
good.
Yeah.
Really good. Thank y'all.
Well,
It's fun.
thank y'all for your time this morning, and we'll see y'all next week.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks for listening to the Tell Me More podcast today. You can subscribe to this podcast on your app of choice, or you can visit us at fbca.org to find out more information about the podcast and our church. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.